What's up guys, Coach Az here doing another striker breakdown today. Today we're taking a look at Israel, the last Stylebender Adesanya. So far in the striker breakdown series, we've done a lot of karate based guys. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Robert Whittaker, and I'll link those ones down below if you haven't checked them out already. Israel Adesanya is very much more of a kickboxer in the more traditional sense of it, as in we're talking full contact kickboxing, K1, that's like his bread and butter. So although he has some similarities to the guys we've already spoke about, he has a very unique, very particular style to himself that you can see his kickboxing roots from. So far in this series, we've taken a look at Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and Robert Whittaker. Both those guys are great strikers in their own rights, but they come from a more karate, points-based background. Israel Adesanya is a kickboxer through and through, so there are some similarities, but he's got some very distinct things about his style that make him who he is. So let's get straight into it, guys. We're going to look at his footwork, his guard, his fakes, what he does with his hands, and of course, what he does with those kicks. Now for me, the most important part of his game is his stance and his guard, including his fakes and movement. I would argue that Israel Adesanya is one of the most effective switch fighters that I've ever seen. By that I mean, he doesn't necessarily tend to prefer being either orthodox or southpaw, and he really does have the ability to throw his weapons from both sides. In fact, in going back and watching a lot of his fights, the pattern that I noticed is he actually prefers to fight his opponents in an open stance. What that means for any of you that aren't familiar with the lingo is if he is in left stance, he wants his opponent to be in right stance. What this opens them up to in particular is that rear leg body kick. He enjoys throwing that to the body as well as taking that upstairs. So although you'll constantly see him switching between, and in fights you'll one time see him favoring orthodox over favoring southpaw, look for what stance his opponent is in. If his opponent fights right leg forward, he will tend to favor left stance. If his opponent fights left stance forward, he will tend to favor the right. Izzy has what I would call a mid-level guard. Nowhere near as low as the points fighters such as Wonderboy and Whittaker. It sits more in the middle. Not necessarily a classic boxing or Muay Thai guard coming up here by the chin. He wears his back arm relatively high, so this is pretty close to the chin coming across the chest, but he does like to leave that front arm low and out in front, using it as a measuring device as well as for setting up his fakes. What makes Izzy really interesting in terms of his stance switching is the way he executes it. Classically, most people jump switch, which just means that on the spot they jump slightly off the floor, switch their feet and land in the opposite stance. Adesanya likes to walk with stances, so he likes to step forward to put his left foot forward or step back to change into the opposite side. Thus not only changing his stance and being able to open up new weapons, but also changing the distance in the fight. He can use the stance switch to close distance by stepping through and forward, or to create space by stepping back. He doesn't tend to bounce. He's not what I would call a light-footed fighter. He likes to remain pretty planted. And when he switches these feet, it's almost like a snake slithering across the floor. There's a deceptiveness to it. If you're focused on what's going on upstairs, which is what he does with his fakes in terms of his shoulders and his lead arm and his hips, you might miss the fact that he switched stance and created the openings that he has. For me, the most effective part of his game has to be his fakes. His fakes are what set everything up. He's not a particularly high volume striker, so he's not out there throwing combinations. In fact, in watching his fights, the biggest combo I saw him throw was about 3 shots. He tends to favor single shots or 2-hit combinations. However, when you tie in the amount of fakes he's throwing, if you make these part of the combination, then they're far more extensive and they're far more complicated than what they might look like on the surface. Stylebender is constantly twitching, whether it be his lead shoulder thrusting forward, his rear shoulder turning as if he was showing a cross, or the great stuff that he does with his hips. He shoots his front hip forward to give you the illusion that he's going to lift and raise that lead leg, or he flicks that rear hip to give you the illusion that that back leg roundhouse kick is on its way. The beauty of these fakes is that Izzy uses them to collect reads. He throws them again and again to see what patterns and what responses his opponents give. These responses will help him decide what technique to throw. This is why he doesn't feel the need to throw a 3 or 4 punch combination. He'll throw 3 or 4 fakes to see the one single opening he needs to be able to throw and land. Getting into the punches that he does like to throw, he has a really sharp, really keen, and very varied jab. His jab comes from multiple angles. Again, I spoke about how his lead arm likes to sit a little bit lower. So similar to what we said about Robert Whittaker about that jab coming up through the center. He enjoys to split the guard, meaning he comes up between the 2 hands, splitting the guard. You'll see him jabbing both with his fist horizontal, but more often than not actually in this vertical position. The beauty of this vertical position, especially in the small 4-ounce gloves of the UFC, is again, it's a more narrow weapon. So instead of it having to fit this through, it only needs to fit this through. So even with a tight guard, you can slip that punch up through the middle and get through the defense. As well as using that lead arm to jab, he likes to use it to frame. He likes to place it on his opponent, whether it be on their face, on their shoulder, on the side of their head. And he uses this as a measuring tool because he knows if I can reach you with my lead arm, I can hit you with my second. But also as a way of manipulating his opponent's position. He'll use it to physically move your head towards his power hand to shoot his cross. He'll use it to guide your body into his rear leg roundhouse kick. He's also really aware of the tactile sensation. The idea that when you feel someone touching your head as a fighter, your default setting is to bring your defenses up. You raise up to protect what you feel is being attacked, thus creating openings in particular to the legs and to the body. So he does this a lot with his back leg roundhouse kick. He'll put his lead arm on them on their head or their shoulder to draw their defenses up, create the opening to the body or to the leg, and then rip that kick, break away, reset, recover. You'll see him using this framing tactic a lot to set up his rear hand. He'll stop right in front of you, place that lead hand on you, look and wait to see where your guard moves, and then bang, crack you with that straight cross off the back arm. He makes great use of that walking stance switch that I talked about, in particular to throw that check hook. So instead of doing it the classic way, where we throw the hook as we pivot our way round, Adesanya likes to step back. So what was his rear arm becomes the lead arm as he steps back, creates space, and strikes with the hook onto an oncoming opponent. Moving on to the kicking techniques, I urge you to go back and look at Adesanya's previous kickboxing bouts. He used a really wide variety of techniques, plenty of spinning action, jumping action. However, in his MMA career, I guess with the threat of the takedown, he has simplified his weapon base. He's condensed it down. When he feels confident or when he knows he's up on the scorecards, he'll open up a bit more. You'll see him throwing spinning kicks occasionally. However, his main weapon has to be his roundhouse kicks that he throws to all different levels and from all different angles. When attacking the legs, Adesanya doesn't have a favorite. He'll come to your outside thigh, he'll come to the calf, he'll come to your inside leg. He'll attack the lead side or the back side. And constantly by switching stances, he changes the weapons that he has access to and also the opportunities in terms of the targets that he has access to. You saw how effectively he utilized this against Paulo Costa, really attacking that outside leg and drawing a lot of attention down to eventually get the knockout with the head kick and following up with the hands. When it comes to kicking to the body, this is where that open stance position really comes into play. This is where he really favors to be the opposite stance to his opponent, which exposes their midriff to that back leg. That way, when he shoots that kick in, the whole of his shin bone can come into contact across that abdomen, push the wind out of his opponent, maximum impact, maximum damage. Like I said about the framing, he'll often frame off the head with that lead arm and bang, shoot that leg into the body, or work fakes off that lead side hip or rear side shoulder to create the opening to slip underneath the guard with the kick. When it comes to taking this kick upstairs, one of his most effective ways of utilizing it, and certainly one of his favorites, is the question mark kick. He likes to set it up off of push kicks to both the knee and the body. Throw one, throw two, get them paying attention to this lead chamber, this knee coming straight up through the middle and anticipating that it's going to push towards the target before bringing it up and flicking it up over that shoulder to attack the head. He's got fantastic mobility through this technique, which allows him to throw it at a lot closer range than most people realize. And the beauty of that means is that he can throw a kick when his opponent least expects it. Adesanya does enjoy the occasional spinning technique. He's not particularly reckless with it. He likes to choose his opportunities, but you will see him going for spinning elbow strikes and spinning back fists. One of my favorite things that he does is when he knows he's going to miss, as in when he knows his opponent has read the spin and they step back, he likes to follow through with his roundhouse kick. Now, it's not the most devastating kick in the world, but at least what it does is it forces his opponent to reset and pay attention to it rather than swarming in and trying to handle him straight away after missing the shot. Adesanya has a real sniper approach to striking. He doesn't like to waste any energy. There's no bouncing movement. He'll walk around the cage, stalk you slowly, create openings with fakes that use very little energy, create his opening, throw his strike, land it, and go for that KO. This reserved striking approach is also what makes him so effective in the takedown defense, with the exception of what happened against Jan Blachowicz, where I believe personally the weight became a big disadvantage, and also Jan did a great job of taking him down in the center of the cage and not letting him get to the fence. Adesanya is shown to have great defense up against the fence, but has been shown that he is a bit more vulnerable when in the center of the cage. But beyond that exception, this reserve style, this wide base, and this selective striking makes it very difficult for wrestlers and BJJ practitioners to get inside to do what they do best in the first place. Tempo plays a huge part of his game. He likes to slow the fight down. Again, that flat movement, that slow walking and stalking, the small combinations, it almost lulls his opponent to kind of fall into his pace of fighting. You'll see it so often in his fights where he draws someone down into his speed. He gets them to play his game. The problem with that is no one plays his game better than him. Of course, his confidence and his swag is a huge part of what he does, bringing inspirations from animes and cartoons. He's a really entertaining, dynamic striker, and I do believe that he's going to hold on to that middleweight championship for quite a long time. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this striker breakdown. Please comment down below and let me know who you want to see next. Hit that like button if you enjoyed it, hit subscribe if you haven't done already, and I will see you on the next one.